This is the story of the San Francisco earthquake of 1989 and of the future of America's most beautiful city.
The experts tell us that there is a very good chance, almost certainly, during our lifetimes, the lifetimes of most adults in the Bay Area, there will be a major earthquake here. Yet most people have not taken that to heart. I like to call it not earthquake country, but ostrich country.
On the afternoon of October 17th at 5:04, a medium-strength earthquake erupted 60 miles south of San Francisco. 6 seconds later, it hit the city. Television and security cameras recorded its impact with an immediacy never ever seen before. It was all over in 15 seconds.
Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can you feel that? I sure can. Okay, this is interesting. There go the lights. Oh, emergency.
Yes, have you gotten word about the Bay Bridge?
What about the Bay Bridge? What's wrong with it?
The upper deck appears to have collapsed during that earthquake.
Hold on a second. Jesus Christ, we gotta report that they might have left on the car.
It went dark and then the generators caught, and so we had partial light. And we had to figure out what to do, where to go, what was happening, how bad was it. We knew that we had to get on the air.
We're over the Bay Bridge now. Once again, a section of the upper deck has collapsed. There appears to be a rescue helicopter on the upper deck. Where it collapsed, it just missed the bus.
George Watson is standing by right now in San Francisco, where they took the brunt of this earthquake today. George.
The city is in gridlock. I hate to paint a dire picture, but it's the kind of scenario where you see looting happening sometime in the night.
It's been a frightening scene here. As you can see, just below me is where 50-foot section. You see down there below the two cars that were on the upper deck.
So I need an ambulance. Hold on, I'll transfer you.
Prepare yourselves. Shut off the gas. Shut off electricity. Store water in your bathtub. Don't expect services for 72 hours.
Now, the important thing to remember is check your gas mains. That is the first and most important thing you have to do in case of a gas leak. You don't want to run the risk of a fire. Ana Chavez has just come in. Ana, do you have some late information coming in?
We're just getting reports from our crews on the scene that there is a major fire.
There are some fires, obviously, in the city of San Francisco. Again, as we take a look at that, that appears to be what would be the Marina District.
The entire upper deck of the Cypress structure, that is a section of highway that connects the Bay Bridge to the Nimitz, Highway 880. It just seemed to collapse during the shaker. You could see those ripples in the road. I'm guessing, but what I am afraid of, and the information we seem to be getting seems to confirm this, that those ripples in small part are caused by vehicles trapped underneath. We have no idea how many vehicles were trapped underneath. If you could see how violent that shaking must have been.
Because of our power outages and wire services are not coming in with other reports.
Well, we're told that this earthquake today was measured at between 6.5 and 7 on the Richter scale.
Power failure, therefore the game will be postponed. We ask that you hold on to...
We have been told that there has been some dramatic rescues in the area of this, what you're looking at right now, the Cypress structure. People have risked their lives to crawl up under those two compact pieces of highway to find survivors, and they have brought people out alive.
We were told that this person in here now that they're going for, and we don't know if this is a family or if this is one person, but we are told that there is someone alive right here. We will keep you in touch with what's going on, and we'll let you know, of course, if they are able to pull this person out of here alive, and we'll let you know if we get any firm figures on anything. At this point, we have not been able to.
All right, Leslie, we'll be coming back with you as soon as you have some more information for us. Thank you very much for that live report. That was Leslie Griffith reporting live. We are getting a report now. At least 50 people are dead tonight because of this earthquake.
Trap car, they can't move or nothing like that.
I'm going to get them out without mega heavy equipment. I don't know.
I think all of us find something in us when there's a crisis to just continue. And we continued to have aftershocks while we were on the air. And I would roll with them. And people in Marin County, as soon as I would see it on the air, they'd feel them a few seconds later. So folks in the South Bay who are watching us would feel them. We'd feel them here. And then it would kind of roll northward.
You can see this block of Divisadero is practically entirely on fire. The house on the right is the first one that went, and it went because of a natural gas.
The media were among the few prepared for this earthquake.
Are you still stressed out over the quake? Well, don't feel alone.
Television took over when government emergency radios failed.
I think in the first few hours after the earthquake, there was really no other source of information besides TV and a few radio stations. People were largely without power in some of the areas that were badly hit. Even in areas where the power was back on, they knew enough about the size of the earthquake by then to know that they didn't want to get out on the streets. We were urging people to stay home. The phones were jammed. In some cases, the phones were out for several hours. People were isolated from friends, relatives, co-workers, and television became a sort of little village for everybody. They could keep in touch with what was going on in the rest of the Bay Area, get some idea of who might be in danger, where the damage was, and the areas that were okay.
Again, I guess until you come down here, you don't realize how incredibly devastating this earthquake was. How did you get out?
From by the window.
You climbed out the fire escape?
No, I didn't. People climbed for me and brought me down.
I think that in a sense, we were the conduits for not only people learning that, but the experts who had to go out later and kind of followed our trail.
I can only describe the situation here as nightmarish. The entire city, at least the part of the city that I have been in all day, is completely blacked out. There are no traffic lights. Civilians, if you were, are trying to direct traffic. People are wandering the streets aimlessly. It is a horrible, sickening feeling to be in the city. I could only advise people to not come here under any circumstances.
At dawn the next morning, teams of investigators went to assess the damage, while seismologists began to locate the exact origin of the earthquake.
It's a little bridge. A culvert goes under. Yeah, in the ground.
There is the house down the hill. Or what's left of it, shall we say.
The movement of the earth had buckled roads and curbs. As seismologists searched for where the fault had ruptured, engineers were to find damage that eventually was to total $10 billion. The supporting columns of a bridge had punched through the roadway, so violently was the ground shaken. The center of the earthquake was found 60 miles south of San Francisco. The Santa Cruz Mountains had wrenched themselves 6 feet to the north and ripped open the earth along a 25-mile segment of the San Andreas Fault.
There was no indication of a shake. There was just the initial boom, and everything went.
He was thrown to his right, and I was thrown to my left. So
you ended up on the floor.
Oh yeah.
Each time. And it was like riding a roller coaster. It was just kind of like this. It was just a real rocking and rolling and like this. It was really a rocking and rolling.
It all happened so fast. I mean, it takes longer to explain it, but it happened so fast. The crack opened up about 3 feet, and a lot of my tools and everything else flushed. They all bounced right into it. It's like everything was headed right towards that crack. The center of vibration was pushing all towards that crack. And then it shut back up. It shut back to about 1.5 to 2 foot. And it's kind of a thing, you know, I've never seen it happen before. I've heard it doesn't happen, but I watched it happen.
Geologists reported that the ground had shaken for a surprisingly short time.
So this map shows where the earthquake occurred, about a 25 length of the fault, San Andreas Fault ruptured, and the epicenter is in the middle of that rupture length, which means that that fault ruptured in two directions. We call that bilateral rupture, which means that had the earthquake ruptured from one end to the other, the duration of the earthquake would have been twice as long, say 25 to 30 seconds. This earthquake lasted 10 to 15 seconds.
So that was a close call?
That was a close call, and we were lucky that the duration was only as long as it was. Now, the significance of that is that the level of shaking dies off in solid materials, the rock, with distance. And these contours on this map show 60% of G near the source of the earthquake in Santa Cruz, up to 0.4 here, and then 10% of G in San Francisco and Oakland, 60 miles from the earthquake.
Here in Oakland, 42 had died, though some were miraculously rescued. All this occurred 60 miles from the center of a medium-sized earthquake. 1 mile of a double-decker freeway, known as the Cypress structure, had collapsed onto its lower deck.
In order to determine how the structure failed, we had to look further and assess how the structure was actually built and constructed. And in order to do that, we have done a series of analyses of the construction details. I can show you here the exterior joint of the bridge at the lower level. At this point, there's very little reinforcement that goes through the joint because of how joints were detailed at that time. And a crack formed through here. And once that crack fully develops, the column up here under its own weight tends to move sideways, splaying out with the upper deck simply dropping down to the lower deck of the structure.
People were killed alone at the Cypress structure. People in their cars. When the top part of the Cypress structure fell down to the bottom part, there were also people who died on the ground when that happened. 400 injuries have now been reported from this 7.0 earthquake that hit at 5:04.
This overpass, built in 1957 of rigid concrete, was not flexible enough to ride out the earthquake.
Let me show you the results of our computer analyses that we've done so far. In this picture, we have an animated view of how the structure goes back and forth in a fairly fluid motion, about 2.5 times per second for a simplified earthquake. What we have done is to determine that the structure should have been subjected to about 10 times the force that it was originally designed for. Had the structure been designed now, it would be designed for these higher force levels, but of course it wasn't at that time.
What you're looking at here is Coast Guard, the Circle of the Waters, looking for people that might have fallen into the water after the accident on the bridge.
A section of one of the most famous bridges in the world, the San Francisco Bay Bridge, also collapsed.
What happened was this part of roadway, which is between the damaged area and Oakland, moved 7 inches toward Oakland and came back 2 inches. Now, when it moved towards Oakland, it came off these support. Support length was only 6 inches, and the movement was more than 7 inches, so you were short of 1 inch when you pulled these decks towards Oakland. And it collapsed, as you can see in this slide, like a drawer, that you pull it too much, and it comes off the desk. So this part moved towards Oakland and sheared off a large number of bolts here. In my view, it was a blessing. It caused the roadway to move freely without damaging the rest of the structure. Literally hundreds of these 1-inch bolts sheared off, and 2 of these large 2-inch bolts were bent or pulled and broke. So without doing the in-depth analysis at this point, my feeling is that extremely large forces were generated.
The most devastated structures were old brick buildings. They were killers.
I will demonstrate the typical failure of a building
which was responsible for most of the life loss in the recent California earthquake, away from the Cypress structure. There was no connection between the bricks and the roof, or at least there was not an adequate connection for the forces involved in the earthquake. This is an office building built after the 1906 earthquake. It is typical of the high-hazard, larger, unreinforced masonry brick buildings throughout California. The parapet and parts of the top floor separated away from the roof and collapsed, killing 5 people in their cars. The earthquake occurred at 5:04 at the height of the rush hour as people were leaving their jobs.
It's hard to believe. It has to be reminiscent of what happened in 1906 when fire did most of the damage to the city.
The earthquake shook the ground so violently it became like quicksand and fractured water and gas mains. The gas started the fires, and there was no water to fight them. This type of ground failure is called liquefaction.
When the quake struck, liquefaction occurred throughout a wide area here, approximately 40 square blocks. And the pipelines were then suspended in a solution of really water, much like quicksand. And their own weight caused them to break.
Frank Blackburn, assistant chief in the San Francisco Fire Department, speaks here in his private capacity as a fire consultant.
We had 59 water main breaks within the Marina District and a large number of gas main breaks as well. More than 100 in the area. We were totally out of water.
Roads buckled as the ground liquefied. The upper floors of apartment buildings sank down to street level.
It lasted for about 8 seconds, and about 4 seconds into it, we turned around because we were going to run for the playground, and we saw this go, and it just quietly collapsed. It was so bizarre. It was just like a quiet crunch. It just crunched down. So eerie. It was so eerie.
Finally yelled for someone, and someone looked into the window, and that's when I knew we were on the ground.
And you're okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's your car?
Yeah. Thank God I wasn't in there.
Longwood? You need Longwood?
There was one little kid, I think he must have been about 10 years old, and he looked at his mommy and says, "Mama, this has been fun, but when can we go home?" And she says, "We don't have any home to go to." It really hurt.
The Marina District was one of the hardest hit. It lies on man-made land reclaimed from San Francisco Bay. Once marsh and lagoon, it was filled in for the Pacific Exhibition of 1915. Unstable land offered little resistance to violent ground shaking throughout the Bay Area. Roads underlain by sand and mud spread sideways. This bridge sank to the ground as the soil underneath liquefied. Airport runways began to buckle as sand and water seeped to the surface. The ground began to fail in the approaches to the Oakland docks.
Had the earthquake lasted longer, like it could, with a unilateral rupture of, say, 25 to 30 seconds, more areas in these localized locations would have liquefied, and the lateral spreading that we saw in the photographs earlier would have been more extensive. Like at the Oakland and San Francisco airports, the runways would have been much more extensively cracked and disrupted.
The Bay Bridge uses this island as a stepping stone on its way from Oakland to San Francisco. This part of the bridge survived the earthquake unscathed because it is sited on an outcrop of solid rock. Yet nearby, along the margins of the bay, there was extreme localized damage on soft, unstable soils, especially those underlain by clay. This is because soft soils magnify the violence of ground shaking. Here on Treasure Island, the soft reclaimed soils shook 3 times more violently than the rock. It is the underlying geology that governs the amount of damage.
It accounts for most of the soil liquefaction by amplifying the motions, most of the damage to structures in these regions, the collapse of the cypress structure, the failure of the Bay Bridge, more than half the economic damages, and probably 3/4 of the loss of life occurred on these deep clay deposits in this region. More than 50 miles from the actual epicenter of the earthquake. That's a tremendous distance to expect major damage to occur for a magnitude 7 event. And it's the amplification of the motions coming up through these deep soil deposits which was so horribly damaging and controlled these damage patterns.
$10,000 were left homeless and 62 died.
I think initially we were in shock, and then we mourned, and then we got mad, and people started saying, how in the world could this have happened? And then they wanted to know what year the cypress structure was built, who built it, why was it built on the soil that apparently people knew was going to shake violently in an earthquake. People started asking questions, and that's where they are now.
Above all, they wanted to know if the overpass collapse could have been predicted.
It's not only predictable, essentially, to the best of my knowledge, it had been predicted that this is a dangerous structure. The state knew it, and of course, they had begun to take measures to alleviate the hazard. Unfortunately, as it's turning out now, it was not enough.
This overpass was destroyed in a Californian earthquake as long ago as 1971. It prompted a statewide strengthening program, but budget cuts soon undermined it. Eventually, 1,800 engineers were fired. In 1982, an official report warned that the Cypress overpass was extremely dangerous. The section that killed 42 was built on soft soil. The report had accurately predicted that the hardest hit sections would be here on soft, unstable ground.
One of the major areas of damage was the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. 50 feet long, but across the entire width of the roadway, the upper level completely collapsed on the lower level, causing some major damage down there too, trapping some people in their cars. We don't know of right now of the death toll. We are told there are some casualties.
There has never been a proper seismic safety study of this bridge. If there had been, could its collapse have been prevented?
If someone had done very in-depth analysis of the structure and from knowledge of instrumentation, you could predict to some extent, what would have happened to this bridge under big earthquake.
So you could have prevented it?
Yes.
By morning's light, the damage was even more graphic. Just about every one of the 200 restaurants and shops in the mall had damage.
And here in Santa Cruz, could the deaths from falling masonry have been prevented?
Those buildings had been upgraded architecturally just in the last 10 years, and the city of Santa Cruz chose not to spend money on seismic strengthening because they had a trade-off in terms of finances. So there's the result of not spending money on upgrading of collapse hazard buildings.
Where the ground failed in 1906, it also began to fail in 1989. In the 1906 earthquake, the ground failed under these houses. There was similar damage in 1989. Had San Francisco not learned from its past?
We knew 20 years ago that the areas that shook violently in this earthquake were prone to violent shaking in any earthquake. We had a map prepared, distributed to all the Bay Area governments. Yet almost nothing was done about that. The earthquake shook the cypress structure to the ground. The cypress structure was identified as being a danger. The particular areas in the Bay Bridge that shook and broke and collapsed were also known to be at risk. We did nothing about them.
People don't like to deal with the earthquake issue. It's one that the earthquake occurs, people put a lot of attention on it, we make a little bit of progress, but when it comes down to it, it's not going to happen on my watch is kind of the attitude that we see, and they're willing to put this off until the next person that comes into place has to deal with it.
Seismologists had long predicted where October's medium-sized earthquake would strike, the Santa Cruz Mountains. But the ability to name the exact date of earthquakes still lies a long way in the future. By studying how faults move, seismologists are confident they can estimate the location and likelihood of the next major earthquake.
I think our original estimate from 2 years ago of a 50% chance of a 7 in the Bay Area in the next 30 years, that number hasn't gone down. It's probably gone up a little bit. I'm afraid we're going to now have to estimate 60 to 70% chance next 30 years of an earthquake as large as this one. The bad news is that it will be here on the San Andreas, here on the Hayward. It will be much closer to the downtown core urban areas in San Francisco and Oakland. We know that the 70-year quiet period following 1906 is over. Since 1979, we've had magnitude 6s in this part of the Bay Area. Now we've had a 7 here on the peninsula. We know we're into the active part of the cycle when we have to expect magnitude 6.5 to 7 events at the same rate we saw them in the last half of the last century. That means a really serious earthquake in the Bay Area, an average of once a decade.
So how prepared are they for a much bigger earthquake? For 20 years, governments have largely ignored the warnings of science. It is the media which is taking up the battle to educate both public and politicians. There is a realization that San Francisco has perhaps one last chance.
I think the media have a responsibility to make sure the public understands the real and true risks here from earthquakes. I think we have not taken that responsibility as seriously as we should, and we need to do it, and do it now.
Knowledge is power, and even though we've heard that science doesn't yet have the power to predict earthquakes, the knowledge of where the risks are and how deep they run can help us make informed choices.
Anna, 1 million people live on top of this fault, and they don't even know it. And take a look at this study by the California Division of Mines and Geology. Points out that a 7.5 quake on this fault would result in the greatest natural disaster ever to strike the United States. Tonight, you'll see why.
A companion to the San Andreas Fault on the peninsula, the Hayward Fault runs from east of San Jose to San Pablo Bay. Most of the fault is covered by development here in Fremont, but
there are still places where you can see the fault. It's basically along the lowest part at the base of the hill.
One landmark is here in downtown Hayward as the fault splits. The western branch runs directly through Old City Hall. By this time, the fault has passed at least 500,000 people and run through transportation systems, major water lines, and one other important thing. Just beyond, the fault splits Memorial Stadium at Berkeley, actually pushing the south wall north.
Over the last 60 years, this stadium has been pulled apart by as much as 10 inches.
The Hayward Fault is a part of the plate boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. And what we see here, the small amount of offset, is minute compared to what will actually occur in an earthquake, when we can have 6 feet of offset. So this offset, instead of 10 inches, will be 6 feet separated. And when that occurs, that violent movement and the accelerations, the violence of that shaking, will just tear the structure apart. It's an old concrete structure. There's the possibility that it could fail, it could collapse. And on a big football day, there's 70,000, 80,000 people in the stadium. It could be a catastrophic disaster. This stadium was full when this earthquake occurred here. At first, it frightened people. Then this kind of calm. Everyone is standing. There are probably 10 to 12,000 people still in the stadium.
Also close to the Hayward Fault are 64,000 school children and students. Some schools, especially private ones, sit directly on the fault trace, like Hillside School, Berkeley.
A quake on the Hayward Fault would probably tear this building apart. It's built on the fault trace. There's no way we can design a building to withstand those kinds of forces. And we know that these buildings, when they can collapse catastrophically, and people will die in the building.
What did people tell you about the hazards around here in the school?
Nothing. And I think, most people are aware that the Hayward Fault does run right through the Berkeley Hills, but not the specifics.
Well, this is an Oakland fire station very near the Hayward Fault. The building is a combination of brick and old brittle concrete. The policemen and firemen in buildings like this, rather than being a resource for the community, will be victims. That means they'll be injured, they may be killed. These buildings are probably the worst case construction that we have in the state of California.
Also on the fault, the Office of Emergency Services, one of the nerve centers for directing disaster operations. Emergency radio links failed in October and may be expected to fail in future earthquakes. And nearby, the Fairmont Hospital is one of 16 major hospitals, all close to the Hayward Fault. Doctors expect to lose at least a quarter of all their beds.
We estimate that we can lose as many as 8,000 killed in the actual earthquake, and then as many as 30,000 casualties, 30,000 hospitalized injuries, maybe 10 times that number non-hospitalized injuries.
Damage overall could cost $100 billion. Another 11,000 lives could be lost in San Francisco. But is it inevitable?
I think if people really understood that this is a straightforward problem that they can deal with, that it's their family that may be at risk in the collapse of a poorly constructed building or a freeway, I believe that would be the largest step that we need to take to get them to get on with the process of doing something about them.
Pick the load up. In my wildest imagination, had no comprehension that Mother Nature can be that destructive in just,
Yeah, it's amazing. I just didn't think this was going to happen to this,
It makes you put everything in perspective.
But the funny thing, you always think it happens to somebody else, never to yourself.
After October's earthquake, staff and students here at Berkeley discovered that university buildings they used every day were very dangerous. The risks became public knowledge when they found a 14-year-old report listing 27 unsafe buildings, with 6 of them likely to collapse. They included libraries, dining halls, and dormitories. Only 3 had been made safe. Public protests finally forced the university to admit the dangers.
I think there's a risk on the campus as well as in the neighboring communities that there would be quite a few people killed. The hazardous buildings on campus are designed in many cases prior to the advent of modern building codes. The university has identified these and is trying to make progress as to upgrading them, but that's going to take a substantial amount of time. And until then, it remains to be seen what the buildings will likely do in the event of a big earthquake.
I think that they really should publicize in some way the fact that you are entering these buildings that could, could collapse.
The public library and state offices in downtown San Francisco are just two of many government buildings severely damaged in October, which engineers believe could collapse in a major earthquake. But there are no laws compelling them to be made safe. Indeed, most government buildings have been exempt from the codes. Is this a grave omission?
I would argue that it is a grave omission, yes.
Why is it?
Politics.
For years, the legislature has cut taxes and neglected hospitals, schools, and roads. State governors have blocked effective earthquake safety laws. But in just 15 seconds on October 17th, they learned that there is a price to pay. In the Santa Cruz Mall, people died in buildings long known to be dangerous and on unstable ground long known to shake violently. KRON Television began an investigation on behalf of some of the victims, including 21-year-old Sean McCormack, who was crushed to death by a rain of bricks. His girlfriend survived.
And I woke up and my face was like this on the ground and everything was just on top of me and I couldn't move. And the only part of my body I could move with these 4 fingers, and I could feel Sean's back, the back of his back, and his pants and his shirt. And I tried to pull on him, but he wasn't doing anything.
Many owners had long resisted bids to strengthen the buildings.
Every time the issue comes up, the main problem has been the question of money and the availability of money.
Mayor of Santa Cruz says the city will rebuild its mall.
In 1987, the City Council appointed a commission to study proposals to fix earthquake-vulnerable buildings. At that time, the city's building chief was David Steves.
That was the end of it. It died right there. They disbanded the commission. The commission never met. Never met. Never saw it. Nothing.
Did the mayor regret that the City Council turned down the 1987 ordinance?
Do I regret that we turned down that ordinance? It's hard for me to answer that question. I don't look at it in terms of regrets. I mean, I think that we made the decision that seemed wise at the time. I regret the deaths.
They should have done something about it. 2 people are dead. I almost died in there.
What would people have done had they known? Do you think that the people who worked in those shops, if they had been informed that they were working in unreinforced masonry buildings, would have quit their jobs? Do you think that people who owned the businesses would have said, I'm closing up, I'm not running business here any longer?
Shortly after the deaths in the October earthquake, Santa Cruz approved new laws to reinforce its buildings. But San Francisco has the same problem on a bigger scale. In Chinatown, the heart of the city's tourist industry, engineers predict 4,000 could die for every 10,000 occupants.
Chinatown is a dilemma. We have a housing problem. We had the housing problem before the earthquake. If we don't strengthen those buildings, we're going to have even a larger housing problem after the earthquake, plus thousands of people possibly killed on the sidewalks and in the buildings.
Politicians have so far refused to make public money available to strengthen buildings or to help rehouse those temporarily displaced. Some suggest the problem is so overwhelming that San Francisco should let its citizens simply die in the streets.
Well, that's what we've received in testimony at some of our commission hearings, is maybe the simplest way is to let the earthquake take care of the problems, and you kill the people all at once rather than slowly by putting them out on the street.
And what do the people have to say?
I don't know whether anyone's ever talked to the people or not. The people are in a survival mode. They're living from one day to the next. And I'm not so sure they really appreciate the risk they're taking. And given the circumstances that they're in, they don't have much of a choice.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's very bothersome because we know we can correct it. We know we can save lives. We know we can protect the investments. And it's sad to know that you can do something about it, and yet we can't get the money that's needed to solve the problem.
Engineers claim that San Francisco faces a new and even bigger danger. Medium high-rise concrete buildings could collapse, killing 1,000 to 2,000 at a stroke, a lesson learnt from the Mexico City earthquake in 1985.
This was an earthquake that struck in haphazard fashion across the elegant heart of Mexico City. 3 hospitals destroyed, including a maternity clinic. 250 buildings are known to have collapsed. Several hotels collapsed, killing at least 10 Mexican congressmen. This is a tragedy still unfolding, with a death toll steadily rising.
The massive death toll was greatest in new high-rises built to modern seismic standards.
The reason for this is well illustrated by the Mexico City case history, where you have a large magnitude event occurring almost 200 miles from the city proper. By the time the earthquake shaking had reached the bedrock under the city, it was a very moderate level of acceleration, roughly 4% gravity. That's enough to frighten people, but it's not typically damaging the structures. This was, however, in the bedrock underlying Mexico City at the base of a very deep clay deposit, not unlike the deposits along both sides of San Francisco Bay. As this motion propagated up through these deep clay deposits, it got to be a stronger and stronger motion, finally reaching the surface 4 times stronger, with a 0.16 or 16% G acceleration. Not only was it 4 times stronger, but it was a slower back and forth motion, which had a catastrophic resonance effect with tall structures. In Mexico City, it was the more modern structures which were most heavily damaged by this resonant interaction with the ground motions.
University Hall here on the Berkeley campus is one example of rigid concrete buildings vulnerable to collapse. Damaged in this earthquake, it is now being strengthened. How many others are there?
It is my understanding that there are perhaps as many as 24 taller buildings in San Francisco of this non-ductile concrete type. These would be buildings in the 10 to 15-story range.
A relatively small earthquake, which originated 60 miles away, caused this fire. In a big earthquake, according to a recent insurance study, up to 48,000 buildings could be destroyed, a repeat of the 1906 fire. Frank Blackburn, assistant chief in the San Francisco Fire Department, is amongst those who are deeply concerned. He is interviewed in his personal capacity as a private fire consultant.
2 trucks had to be taken out of the fire department museum and put in service during the earthquake to meet the demands of the emergency. Several of our trucks are of 1950 vintage. One fought the fire here, a 1950 Mack truck. That's not the way to have an emergency organization with such old equipment and have to go to a museum to get equipment out to handle a major emergency. And it's literally like an earthquake time bomb ticking away. And when these events happen, the mains will break, fires will break out, and we're put at a very big disadvantage to get it under control.
KRON Television asked the mayor's opinion.
All we do know is the last time it happened, we handled it, and we handled it well.
And you will next time?
Yes.
But in October, it took roughly 1/3 of the fire department's men and equipment to stop one fire.
We've gone from 480 firefighters on duty a day in 1972 to 296 today. And when this quake hit, the fire department actually was overwhelmed by the scope of the event, and we needed help from outside sources to assist the department to function.
We cannot staff our fire department on a day-to-day basis as if the earthquake was going to happen tomorrow. It would bankrupt this city.
It's possible to have a repeat of the 1906 disaster where 28,000 buildings were destroyed, because we have all of our major financial and congested value districts are in the infirm area zones where we will more than likely lose water supply.
Firefighters claimed this portable water system, costing $2 million, could greatly reduce the risks. It bypasses the city water supply by using a fireboat to pump water from the bay. KRON asked the mayor if the city would buy it.
We'll take a look at it in the context of the call for all the things that we need to buy to be ready for the next one, which includes retrofitting of buildings, seismic upgrading, more ambulances, more police equipment. All of this has to be balanced against all of the other things that are also an important part of being ready.
Yeah, I've got something that I was just pulling out in the paper to do a story on. This is an article about, this is 2 months now after the quake when we're filming this. And the headline in Marin, which is just north of San Francisco, says that San Rafael is slowing down on a quake plan. This is a plan to reinforce the buildings in downtown San Rafael. And now they've said, no, we're going to step back and look at it. We need to study it more.
There is a tremendous amount of opposition by building owners with some significant opposition by special interest groups and politicians to spend money in this area, knowing perfectly well that perhaps the payback is way down the road and not tomorrow.
But call it Congress, because I already have an abortion. I know, okay.
If governments are slow to protect their citizens, there are those already preparing for the worst, not least, and perhaps predictably, the television stations.
This building here is built on fill. The building itself is probably safe. It's got steel piers down into the bedrock. Presumably this building would stand up even in an 8 or an 8.5 earthquake. The problem would be our neighborhood might be unsafe. Gas lines might break. The streets would probably buckle. They could liquefy. We could be in a neighborhood where you literally have to wade through mud to get into the building, and it might be condemned just because you couldn't get through the streets. So we're looking at other places where we can go, specifically near a transmitter.
So far, there is little evidence of really effective action or funding. Critics claim Californian politicians simply don't have the guts.
So it needs really an organized program, a phased program of risk assessment, building by building, looking at the whole picture, and then deciding what is it that will cause the most casualties or the largest losses, and let's do that first. And then take our time over the next 5, 10, 15 years to eliminate as many of these problems as we physically can.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I think if the earthquake had been a little bit stronger and a little bit closer to San Francisco, it would have happened. Right now, I only can hope it will happen.
The only thing that would shift opinion about being earthquake prepared is another bigger earthquake. I think that may make a difference. At this point, we've had a 7.1 earthquake, which is a significant earthquake, very strong. But an 8.1 earthquake, 30 times more energy, is going to cause 100 times more damage. And I think then people are going to say, why didn't we? And perhaps we'll prepare for another earthquake. I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's going to be any change. I don't think people in this area are wise enough to take what the experts are saying and make the kinds of changes in their lives to make themselves earthquake safe.
The quake of '89 will repeat Saturday evening at 6. And if this view of earthquakes left you a little gloomy about your prospects, stay tuned for a more optimistic view of your chances of surviving the big one. Next.